Alright, getting right into it today, we're just going to do a quick one. I'm going to be going over a sealed deck that I played at my local event last week where I went 4-0. It's called the Majestic Dragon Tamer, which makes it one of the better named decks that I've had so far, although it has been much better, I've noticed, in set 2 and set 1, and it has 3 of my favorite houses, Sanctum, Logos, and Dis. So I was very happy when I first looked at this deck. I took a look at the deck list card, and I didn't really know what to make of it because it didn't have anything like standoutish to me, but it ended up being a very good deck, and I just wanted to share it. So we're just going to jump right in. We got, so Binary Rupture ended up winning me a good few of my games. Perhaps it was just anecdotal, there's decks where this card is good, there's decks where this card is bad, there's times when this card is good, there's times when this card is bad. Every time I played this card, it seemed to be good. Maybe things just worked out for me, but you know what? I've started to like it a little bit more, despite the counter synergy that kind of exists with this card in this deck. But it played out very interestingly because of the large ways that I could manipulate Amber. So I had 2 Wild Wormholes, which, as I was just talking about, the anti-synergy with Binary Rupture. But this card's just really good value because the other cards in my deck are just good value cards. You're just going to notice that the deck is just going to be filled with cards that either make Amber, or control the board, or control Amber, and they all just do something for the most part, with the exception of maybe a couple of the Sanctum cards that aren't so good. And then, now this was the fun part. So with the 2 Wormholes, we had 2 Zix Researcher, and you could use the Zix Researchers to loop the Wild Wormholes, which I did a fair bit. You should play the Wormhole, and then if the thing that you play is not in action, the Wormhole will be the top card, and then you play the Zix Researcher, archive it, and then the next time you play Logos, you can do the same thing. And that was really cool. Or you can just archive something else, or the top part of the deck if you don't have anything. So it's pretty good. Then we got the 2 Brain Eaters, and again, you're going to notice there's a lot of 2-ofs in this deck of fairly good cards, and that was another reason that it ended up being pretty good. There's a lot of consistency, and the cards that were good, helped feed into that. For example, Brain Eater drawing you cards. Igor for some more digging, very good card. Then I got a Hexbion, and because there's not a lot of other archiving cards in this deck, Hexbion ends up being fairly good, whereas if you're playing a deck that has a lot of archive cards, she can kind of screw up your archives, and doesn't perform as well. But in this deck, she ended up being great. Just a lot better in this deck than it would have been in another one, I think. Then we have some more like hand manipulation with sloppy lab work, a little removal of standardized testing, which ended up being fairly good, and Crazy Killing Machine as your all-purpose removal. This card actually ends up being pretty good. I've played it in a few decks, and I don't know if it's the combination of houses or what, but this card just ends up seeming to play a lot better in this deck than it does in the other decks that I've played it in. So moving on to Sanctum, we have 2 Baron Mangvins, just a good beefy boy to have 2 of. Followed by Prince Derek Unifier, which has some synergy with some other cards that I have later down the line. But just having a lot of beefy creatures in this deck, a lot of good board control, you're usually going to be able to get this off for the Virtuous Works on steroids, which makes him really good. And then if you can recur him with the Researcher, which I did not get to do a whole lot, but would have liked to, that can be really good too. Then speaking of Amber manipulation, here we got Obeyed. Obeyed is a very good card. And then there's an Opal Knight. Now this was really interesting too, because there's, if you noticed, a lot of even-powered creatures in this deck. In fact, most of the creatures have even power. And I found that most of my opponents also had mostly even-powered creatures. Now this is my first time playing Opal Knight, and it's possible that maybe I just got a bit lucky. But I have to wonder if it just seems to be that there's a lot more cards that this card hits than other creatures, that Onyx Knight hits, that card seems to be a lot more useless in a lot more situations, as I played that one a fair bit. But every time this card came up, it ended up being pretty good. And despite the fact that most of my creatures were even, just having the couple of odd-powered ones in, if they were on board, left me ahead on board usually, as well as getting to keep this guy behind. And then it also let me trigger off some of my abilities, like the Hexbion or some of the cards you'll see later, which is pretty useful. So I was a lot happier with this card than I thought I was going to be. Following that, I have Grey Rider, again, another even-powered creature. Not the best if you're trying to play Sanctum and you want to like abuse the Grey Rider, and then you draw into Opal Knight and you want to take a Sanctum turn. But the vice versa works fairly well, where you wipe the board and then the board's empty and you can gain some amber that way. So Grey Rider ended up being pretty good. Then we got some just control cards, lots of cards that just give amber, a little bit of manipulation here to stop the opponent from making keys, and a sigil, which ended up being fairly useful, as well as Golden Aura to go with the Grey Rider. I've seemed to get these cards together a lot, and I like that because they pair very well. And then a Hollow Shield, which is not the best, but there's 2 Mangvins in here, so even though the bad Sanctum cards are not the best, they usually get some value out of them somewhere. Now moving on to Dis, we've got an Old Yerk. My experience with these guys has been pretty varied, but generally I think you can't go wrong with a Yerk. And then the Old Yerk is like better than not most of the time. An Ancient Yerk is usually just frustrating unless your deck is bad. It's only good when your deck is bad. Old Yerk, on the other hand, a little more useful. And given that you can pitch some of your maybe not so good Sanctum cards that this deck has, he kind of like helps you get there, and that's pretty cool. Also being one of the few odd power creatures sticks around fairly often. Streak, very useful. Scales very well when your opponent has some chains on them. Didn't really come up because it was a sealed event. But, you know, just reducing their hand size by 1 if it sticks around is pretty good. And, you know, just the imps in general are fairly decent. Although I did play against them with 2 extinctions, and them hitting all my imps, like the Streak and the Tesmal here, it can be a little frustrating. But for the most part, they're pretty good cards, and they got the job done. I got Tentacus here. Tentacus for, again, just punishing artifacts is always good. Now, here's another killer one. So the deck had 2 Dust Imps, and it's an even-powered creature, which meant that I could destroy them both with Opal Knight or whatever I needed to do. And then, you know, it's just a good card to recur as well with things like the Zix Researcher. And this card, if I loop through my deck, which I tended to do, did very well. Then I have 2 Amber Imps. Again, just making sure you got that Amber control in there. You're going to be winning the board most of the time with this deck, just because the creatures are fairly big. And then you have a lot of cards that let you trade without taking damage in the Sanctum. So, you know what? These were pretty useful. They almost never stunned anything, but just the fact that they were present was very, very handy. Then we got a Lash of Broken Dreams, always a good card. And then we had a bunch of removals. We had Banish, and then Collar of Subordination. And I'd like to just mention that this card, taking a creature of a house that you don't own, or even if it is one that you do own but don't have in play, can really make the Prince Derek Unifier a lot easier. And you can do some nifty kind of removal things with this. It's very all-purpose, and I like that. And then we had a Gargoozle just to get some more Amber and removal. So this deck got 4 chains because I went 4-0. And then I did play a game or 2 afterwards with some people while playing with the 4 chains, and it managed to get there in both of those games. So I was very happy with how this deck turned out, and I just wanted to share. If you're interested in kind of seeing like how I play these games, I may do some videos on that at another time. But for now, just I'm gonna put up some deck profiles when I find interesting stuff like this, where the cards just kind of come together.